Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. I am sharing cards using another one of From Lizi's mega packs. This one is called I Do. This is a wedding themed mega pack. It contains 32 sheets of 8x8 pattern paper, 8 steel dies. Some of them are sentiments and then some of them are images like the rings and the hearts, and there's some cute little bells in there. And although the theme of the mega pack is wedding, most of the papers could actually work for a variety of card themes, and I'm going to show you that in my video. So there's a quick look at all of the papers, and then I selected a variety of different peel-off colors that I thought would work well with the mega pack. It also includes 4 sheets of specialty paper, but like always I do include a bunch of other cardstock just because I like to use a lot of layers. So let's get started with card number 1. I chose a sketch from Operation Ride Home. This is number 116. The background paper, I'm just using some polka dot paper and then some of this brown cardstock to mat all of it. And as you could see, I did cut out a scallop circle out of the background of that matted layer. And for this strip of paper that goes across the card, I'm using this gold satin paper. This was part of one of the add-ons. I always love to pick up the specialty papers. They're just so beautiful. And I always keep any of the little scraps because you never know when you'll be able to use it on a future card. So I did layer that with some of just this brown cardstock. And then I pulled out this beautiful floral paper. Lots of muted colors in this whole collection, and I just used a stitch die for the circle and then a little scallop circle to layer that one. And then I'm just going to use this really small sentiment set, and so for this card it's going to have sending you a big hug. I think this would be perfect as maybe a get well card or a sympathy card, or even just a card for someone that you want to send a little bit of extra love to, and maybe they don't like those really bright colors. So it still has a nice amount of shine, but I don't think it's overwhelming at all. And then because that specialty gold paper has a little bit of dimension, I don't want this circle to kind of sag down on one side. So I did use just some thin foam squares to pop up the one side. And then just a little finishing touch, I'm just using some Nuvo glitter drops. And this is the Gold Coast color. And just finishing off with just a few more of those drops on the center of some of the flowers. So that is card number 1, and I did make 2 of them using this sketch. It's so easy to make 2 of the same cards when you're using 8x8 paper because you can cut 2 of the backgrounds out of just one sheet. So now moving on to my second card. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 405. Even though most of the papers in this collection are a soft brown or kind of an ivory color, there are a few sheets with this pale pink or peach color. So it's really lovely to have just a little extra variety. I used 2 different pattern papers for the background. The top pattern has a really subtle design on there, and then the bottom has kind of more of a lacy looking rose design. And you're not going to see that seam between the 2 different pattern papers because it is going to be covered up with this little diagonal strip that's going to go across the card. And then for that rectangular piece in the center of the card, this is some more of the specialty cardstock that came in one of the add-ons. It has a really nice texture, kind of this wavy look to it. So for that white paper, this is just some white pearlescent paper, and then I'm just putting a little bit of extra shine using some of the clear gold mirror peel-offs. These are really beautiful because they're clear in the center and then they have this gold foil on the edges. I used some gold mirror cardstock to cut out these little double hearts. This again was some of the leftover specialty paper from a previous kit. And then for the ends of all of the peel-offs, I just tucked them behind and then sealing them in place just by using some ATG, layering that on the cardstock, and then I'll just go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. And I do always use white cardstock for all of my card bases. just kind of a habit, and since I buy the paper by the case, it just makes it easier for me. And it's always a nice heavyweight paper. So just using some liquid adhesive to adhere that die cut in place. And so the sentiment on this card, I used one of the dies that's included in the mega pack. This one has congratulations on it. And I did just cut it out using that same cardstock that I'm using all of the layers for. So it's just kind of a muted color on top of all of the other soft colors. I just didn't want anything too dramatic on this one. So this card would work well for a wedding card or an anniversary card. And then a little final touch, I'm just going to add a little banner in that upper corner. And since some of those papers do have a little bit of layer to them, little dimension, I did use just a thin foam square on part of that banner. And once again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. So now moving on to the third card design. I'm using this beautiful butterfly paper where all of those butterflies have been dry embossed. So they're just popped up slightly. And I'm just going to layer that onto some brown pearlescent paper. Once again, this is just extra specialty paper that I hang onto from previous add-ons. The background paper is a tone-on-tone floral design, and then I layered it using some other pattern paper. Just a really pale, kind of an ivory, a yellow paper, but it has a very muted design on it. So even though I generally use cardstock for all of my matted layers, this collection has quite a few just real muted tone-on-tone designs, and I thought this lighter design just worked really nicely with this darker brown paper. So now I'm going to go ahead and add just a simple sentiment on this card. I used some of that polka dot paper and then just cut a really small banner. And then using one of a From Lizi stamp set, I'm just going to have the For You. And I stamped that with some Versamark ink, and then using some of the Platinum Tiara embossing powder. This is also from From Lizi. And I'm just going to go ahead and heat set that, holding onto that with my tweezers because it gets really hot. So it's kind of hard to see, but it has this really nice shine on there that works beautifully with the brown, kind of a silvery color in the card. So let's go ahead and I'm going to layer that on some more of that brown pearlescent paper. I just pop that up with some of the foam dimensional squares, and then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use the Nuvo glitter drops again, and this is the Gold Coast color. So there is my finished card, and once again I did make 2 using this sketch. So since I used a very general sentiment, I think this card would work perfectly for a variety of different card themes. So now moving on to the 4th card design. This is MFT sketch number 428, and this is not going to be a wedding card. In fact, I'm going to make a Christmas card. So using one of the just real muted background pattern papers, and it actually has a fabric feel to it, and it has just like a hint of trees and some kind of little scripty writing on the background. And then I'm going to layer all of that with some green satin mirror paper. And then just to make it a little more Christmassy, I'm adding some of the red mirror peel-offs. Just putting a thin strip above and below the Merry Christmas sentiment. And then I'll just put that sentiment on the lower 2/3 of the card. And then using some red pearlescent paper, I went ahead and cut out 3 sets of these wedding bells. But first I'm going to go ahead and put this card front onto that green mirror paper. And because this background paper has that fabric feel, I don't think it always adheres quite as nicely as I would like it to. So just to ensure that it's not going to fall apart, I did use some score tape. So I'll go ahead and put that card front onto a card base. And now I'll go ahead and attach these little bells. And so they have these little hearts in the center of each of them. And since that would still work for Christmas, but I decided to go ahead and actually remove all of those little pieces. So I'm just using my small fussy cutting scissors to snip out that little heart on It's like a little bar that goes across to adhere it in place. So now they definitely don't have that wedding look as much anymore, especially now that they're in red and then there's all of this green on the card. So just go ahead and use some liquid adhesive to adhere all of those in place. And I kind of rotated them just slightly so they weren't all like straight up and down, just to give it a little extra interest. Now go ahead and add just a small little banner using some more of the green mirror paper. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some of the Nuvo glitter drops. And this is the white blizzard color. It's one of my favorites. So once again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. And I'm actually kind of excited that I already have 2 Christmas cards made and it's only April. I usually don't start until closer to at least August or September. So now moving on to the 5th card design. This is MFT sketch number 247. And for this card, I decided I'm going to make a shaker card. And since it is a wedding themed mega pack, this is going to be a wedding shaker card. Out of all of the 32 pattern papers, there is only one paper that is specifically wedding, and it's actually only one side of the paper. So it has all of these scripty wedding words all over it. It's a very subtle, just a soft tone-on-tone design. So that is going to be the main background for my card. And then I cut a stitched frame using some of the pearlescent paper that's included in the kit. Cut out my acetate to cover that whole frame. So this is going to be a very large shaker. It's like a full card shaker. So I have my foam dimensional tape, and I just had a big long piece, folded it in half so I have my double layer already, and then I'm just cutting really thin pieces to frame that border. Just making sure to get them nice and snug next to each other so that there's no little gaps and none of the little sequins are going to escape out of this shaker card. So sorry about my reflection on there from my overhead lights. Definitely very bright whenever I have anything shiny. So I did put a thin piece of the foam tape kind of in that lower third of the card. And I did that for 2 different reasons. One, since it's a full shaker card, I don't want to lose some of this stability. So this adds just that little extra support. And then also, I cut out the rings using some of the silver mirror paper, and I only want them to be on the upper portion of the card because the sentiment is actually going to be going right over that lower piece of foam. So now I kind of technically have 2 little shakers all within one. So I also added some of From Lizi's Rainbow Wishes sequin mix, which is a beautiful mix and it has little hearts and everything in there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add my little sentiment bar, and this is where I realized I actually had it too long, and so I tried to fix it and I ended up cutting it too short. So I did have to go ahead and cut a second one. And I am using some score tape just to adhere it onto that front panel, and I was very thankful that I could remove that one that I messed up. So usually once it's been on there a while, it does not come off very easily using score tape. So for the sentiment, I again am using the congratulations, and I cut it out using some of this darker gray pearlescent paper that's included in the mega pack. And then I'm just going to add a small little banner in that upper corner, and this one I am using some more of the silver mirror cardstock, the same cardstock that I cut out the rings. And then just a little extra shine, I'm using some more of the glitter drops, just one on each side of the sentiment. And again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. I just love how this one turned out. It's just beautiful. So now moving on to the 6th card design. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 412. And if you are interested in any of the sketches or the measurements, I do provide all of that over on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description box below. So for this card, on the background, the paper is some of this beautiful pearlescent paper that's included in the kit. And then I'm just using some more of that polka dot paper for that strip that goes across the card. And then a very kind of muted design for this circle in the background. And I did cut out a scallop circle for the matted layer. And then just to add a little more sparkle, I used some of the gold glitter peel-offs just to put one above and below that polka dot paper. And then I did add just a small piece of cardstock on each of the end of that strip, just so that it was nice and even on the card, because that circle had a little bit of extra dimension. And then I adhered that whole strip down using some score tape, simply because sometimes the cardstock on top of the specialty paper doesn't seem to hold as well with just the ATG. So then I used some more of this beautiful gold mirror specialty paper to cut out the bells along with this anniversary word. So this card has a lot of beautiful gold shine to it. And then with that anniversary word, there are these two little hearts on the ends. So those pop out, so I decided to keep those little hearts, cut out a couple extras, and then just use them as my little embellishment in that upper right-hand corner. And then to adhere the little bell, I wanted to pop it up just slightly, but I didn't want any of the foam dimensional tape to show through. So I do have these old dimensional squares that are actually clear. Unfortunately, they have been discontinued like months ago, so I won't be able to link them, but I still had a partial package left over. So I'm just cutting them into really thin little pieces, which is tricky because they're actually very sticky. So again, I'm trying to cut one more little piece on there because it was hanging over. And then just one little finishing touch, I'm using some more of the Nuvo glitter drops, the gold coast color, and I'm just adding it on the inside of the hearts on each side of the word. So there are my two cards using this sketch. So moving on to my next card, this is Mojo Monday sketch number 500. I have two different pattern papers. The one on top has this really lovely dry embossed look with all of that white intricate design, and then just some more of that polka dot paper for the lower portion. And then on the sketch, it has those two thin strips that go across kind of a little bit lower than half the card. So instead of adding just solid cardstock, I decided to use some of the brown mirror peel-offs. So I'm using the two widest widths for kind of to make that wider strip, but I just put them right next to each other, and then I used the medium width for that strip right below it. And I didn't go all the way across the card. Well, I did on the one color, or on the one width, but on the other two I didn't, because I'm going to be using a sentiment over the center, so you're not going to see that part anyway. And then just using two different cardstocks for those thin strips that go down the card. One of them is just kind of a lighter brown, and then the dark brown that I'm using for all the matted layers. I know it might look black in this video, but it's actually just a really dark brown. So then I just cut out this little sentiment box with a stitched rectangle die, and I felt like the white was just a little too bright, so I just used some Distress Oxide ink. This is the ground espresso color, and just to add a little bit of color so it wasn't so bright. And then using that same color ink, I'm going to add my sentiment. And so this will be a sympathy card. The sentiment is with heartfelt sympathy. The colors in this paper collection with all of the really soft muted browns and ivories just work so perfectly for the sympathy cards as well as the wedding, or like I said, kind of any general theme. So I tried not to add like a lot of extra sparkle or anything. So other than those mirror peel-offs, this card is pretty muted. And so for the Nuvo drops, this is just one of the crystal colors, and this is the dark walnut. I just put 3 small drops of it underneath the sentiment, added that little heart and a little banner for embellishments. So I did make 2 cards using this sketch. So moving on to my next card. This is Freshly Made Sketches number 382. I'm using this beautiful, really soft pink paper that has a spot gloss detail on it. So it's kind of in white, has all these floral and little bird designs on it. And then the background paper is kind of like a simple, maybe a lace or just sort of a floral design. And then I'm just using some of the clear silver mirror peel-offs. I'm just putting 2 of them on the bottom of that pink box. And then for the layers on both of these, I have the darker pearlescent paper for the main part of the card and then that lighter gray pearlescent paper for this pink box. That would be fun to combine 2 of the different grays. So let's go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. And then using that same dark gray pearlescent paper, I used the Wedding Day die. And then I decided to add just this soft pink cardstock behind that die cut, just for where the sentiment shows through. So I just kind of cut it so that you wouldn't see any of that pink on like the edges of the die, because it has all of these little tiny hearts going around that scallop circle. So I just adhered that in place using some liquid adhesive. And then I'm definitely changing this card quite a bit compared to this sketch. So first I added just that little thin strip of the pattern paper on the inside of the card just for some extra detail. And then I'm just popping up that sentiment using some foam dimensional adhesive. And then I also cut out the little double hearts using some of the silver mirror cardstock. And then I'm just going to adhere that one in that upper corner, and then I adhered the sentiment in the lower corner. And then just final touch on this card, I'm using some more of the Nuvo glitter drops in the white blizzard color. Overall, I think this design is fairly simple. It'll be perfect for a wedding card or even for making your own wedding invitations. So once again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. So now moving on to my next card. This is Sweet Sunday sketch number 220. And this is a sketch I use quite often since it's one of my favorites. The background paper is some of the pattern paper that has this fabric feel to it. So this is a reason I'm using some score tape to the back, since I just want to make sure it holds in place. And then next I'm going to use the Wedding Day die. And I'm actually only using it to cut out this scallop circle. I just used a small piece of washi tape to adhere it where I want it on this brown floral paper. And then I really want that scallop circle to show, so I'm just going to put some more of this cardstock. So what I could have done at first was to cut it out before I added my layers, but I think I had another idea in mind at first and then changed my mind, so I did end up going back and adding the cardstock again. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a sentiment, and I'm just using a lighter brown paper for that. And I'm going to use some more of the embossing powder. So I've used my anti-static powder, some Versamark ink, and I'm just going to use my Mini Missy just to ensure I get a nice solid impression. And then the embossing powder is the same color as before. This is the Platinum Tiara by From Lizi. And I'll just go ahead and heat set that. And this little piece of the cardstock does have a texture feel to it, but I used the back side since I've learned that when you emboss, it doesn't always work as well on top of the texture. So if you use a little smoother paper, it seems to do better. And then I just wanted to add a little bit of a frame around this sentiment. So I'm just using some of the brown mirror peel-offs. I just kind of put one slightly inside of the edge and then wrapping the end of it behind. And then I'll just layer all of that on some of this dark brown cardstock. And I'll just add a little piece of the pattern paper on the inside of the card. And then next I cut out these little flower pots. And this is a die that was included in another one of Love From Lizi's mega packs. It was the one from last month, which is the Secret Garden. So I cut out 3 of them using some of the pearlescent paper in this kit. It has a really pale pink color to it. And the reason I did 3 is since I wanted to add a little bit of dimension. So I just used some liquid adhesive and glued them all one on top of each other. And then I'm just going to add a little extra detail with some banners. So I just used a banner die and then just cut them a little bit shorter to the length that I want them. And I'm using 2 different colors and just kind of staggering them on top of each other slightly. And then I did add just a little bit of cardstock underneath one of them just so it didn't sag down, just because there's a little bit of extra layer from all the other layers on the card. And then just finishing touch, a couple drops of the Nuvo glitter drops. So once again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. So now moving on to my final card design. This is Freshly Made Sketches number 373. And I love using this sketch, although I don't think I've ever used it with the measurements that I have listed. For the main image on this card, I'm using this beautiful pattern paper that has this lovely spot gloss feature on it. So it's on the birds and then this little floral design on the left-hand side of it. For the background of the card, I'm just using some solid colored cardstock that has kind of a linen look to it. And then I cut these 1/2 inch strips from a variety of other pattern papers that I had left over. And then I went ahead and adhered that whole piece onto some gold mirror cardstock. And then just to add a little bit of detail between each of those strips, I'm using some of the clear gold mirror peel-offs. And what I meant to do was add those before I actually adhered it to that cardstock layer, but I forgot, but it still worked out just fine. So since I know I'm going to have that image in the center, I didn't put those peel-offs all the way across, just to save on the peel-offs. And I probably could have done the same with that pattern paper since I knew it was going to be a large image, but I didn't think about it at the time. So I did use 2 different mirror cardstocks for the layering. The image has a satin mirror and then the background has more of that high gloss mirror cardstock. And then just wanted to pop that whole image up using just some foam dimensional tape, and I didn't want any of it to sag anywhere, so I did use strips across the whole thing. And I'm just going to add a nice general hello sentiment using some more of this gold mirror cardstock. And it's nice because it doesn't really cover up much of the image, so it really lets that image be the feature on the card. And then just adding one tiny little banner in that upper corner. So once again, I did make 2 cards using this sketch. So here is just a quick recap of the 20 cards I made using Love From Lizi's I Do Mega Pack. This is a beautiful mega pack and can be used for far more than just wedding cards. There are still the 8 dies included, but even some of those don't have to be just for wedding. I had so much fun using these really soft muted colors. As much as I enjoy all of the bright colors, it's nice to have a variety once in a while. I always have to remind myself that not everybody wants a pink and sparkly card, as much as I love to make them. So I like to have quite a few different paper collections on hand. That way I can really make a card to fit perfectly for the card recipient. So leave me a comment and let me know which card was your favorite this time. If you're interested in any of the products, I do have links in the description box. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.